to the dangers of fracking, what went wrong at West Newton. And a little bit of housekeeping, we're not expecting any fire alarms, so if there's a fire alarm, out you go, one of the two exits there, the toilets are there, and if you need any help with anything, come and ask me. I'm going to introduce Lou from Communities of Holderness Against Onshore Drilling. So Lou.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. It's cold, it's the middle of the week and it's December, so we really appreciate you turning out. Slightly changed the format of tonight after the last one because everybody said it was really long, there was a lot of information to take on board. So we're going to run for about 3/4 of an hour, then we're going to have a little break so you can think about what you're seeing, get a drink, go to the loo, or come for a break. And then we're ready to go. So, West Newton. West Newton's about 50 miles from York. It is the most beautiful part of the world. They always pick the nicest places to drill. So, what happened? What I'm going to do is I'm going to run you through exactly the whole process that we went through at West Newton and leading up to the ultimate, why Rathlin denied they ever did the mini frack. So, Holderness. Holderness is a small county in England, in the East Riding of Yorkshire. The dash for gas in Holderness hasn't just happened overnight. It's been 50 years in the making and the planning. It's been waiting for the technology to come along. So what has happened in 50 years that we've suddenly gone from beautiful countryside to the possibility of 10 compounds drilling for gas and extracting gas, each with capable of taking 40 wellheads. So, in 1934, the government in the UK recognised that oil and gas was going to be huge. So there was the Petroleum Act. And the Petroleum Production Act gave all rights for oil and gas to the Crown. It also gave the right for any oil and gas company to come onto your land, and if you weren't in agreement, it was compulsory purchase order. So you couldn't say no. In 1950, onshore drilling began in Humberside. Now I know about this because I've got a list from DEC, the Department of Energy and Climate Change, of every single well that has been drilled in the UK up until 2014, right from going back to the 1800s. So, but in 1950 they started onshore drilling in Humberside. The main driver at that time was BP, British Petroleum. Long history about British Petroleum that I won't go into now, but British Petroleum nearly went under and Churchill bailed them out. So there's no difference between now and back then. These people get away with everything. So in 1965, off the coast on the East Riding of Yorkshire stretching up, there is the UK continental shelf. That's what they call the oil and gas part of that North Sea off our coastline. It stretches all the way up to Norway. Now in 1965, I can't remember how many tons, it's a huge boat really, ship, whatever you want to call it. They converted it to an oil platform, an oil and gas platform to drill out in the North Sea. And in 1965 the CGEM discovered gas. Before I go on to Easington, I'll also say that what happened, the CGEM actually went under and capsized. And when that did, many people died. So new rules and regulations, it's the first time that rules and regulations were brought in to govern oil and gas in the North Sea. And many of those offshore rules that were brought in apply onshore because they still haven't fixed all the rules for onshore drilling, so they use landfill and offshore drilling regulations. So in 1967, Easington Terminal is opened. Now Easington sits in Holderness, as you know. They've subsequently opened Dimlington as well, all part of that huge processing plant. Easington is hugely important. There's only about 4 of these massive gas and oil processing plants, or gas processing plants. Easington was the first place where offshore gas was piped onshore for processing and production, and then moved straight out into the grid. When it came from Norway, from the Langellid field, and the Langellid pipeline at that time was the longest pipeline in the world, piping up from the top of the UK continental shelf directly onshore to Easington. That has now been usurped by the Nord pipeline from a similar field on the UK continental shelf. So, in 1970, BP undertook a massive programme of 2D seismic testing. Now, there was only 2D seismic testing around at this time. There was no 3D, which is much more in depth. So when they do 2D seismic testing, they put the charges in and it runs linear. When they do 3D seismic testing, it's done in a grid. Okay? And what they do is they send the explosives they're put into the ground, they let the charges off, the shock waves come back, and it's recorded on a computer. Now, it's a bit complicated, but a 3D seismic test, it doesn't tell you where to drill, but it can pinpoint where not to drill. And that's about the best they've got really at the moment. In 1986, the Gas Act was introduced. This became hugely important because it did one major thing. It tried to protect the consumer, but what it also did was remove the compulsory purchase order for onshore drilling. Which means now that anybody who wants to drill, if they choose your land, they have to go through proper negotiations, and there's no longer a legal obligation for you to comply. So in 2006, as I previously stated, the the Langellid pipeline was completed, piping into Easington Terminal. And in 2008, the East Riding of Yorkshire approved plans for a massive additional pipeline infrastructure. It's huge. It's 18 months worth of additional pipelining to carry gas. In 2009, the next stage of Easington was opened, another massive eyesore on our coastline at Dimlington, and that's a compression and terminal integration project. And this is used for processing and distribution. In 2013, Rathlin Energy did their core drill at West Newton A. In 2014, they carried out the well testing at West Newton A. And in 2016, Murphy's started the extension to the existing pipeline infrastructure that was passed by the council in 2008. Work is now complete, just about. So, this is what we're all here for, hydraulic fracturing. What exactly is it, and why has this technology suddenly appeared in this country? And, you know, what is it? So, short video for you.
Fracturing for shale gas and hydrocarbons takes place at around 3,000 metres. First they drill vertically and then horizontally. The hole is reinforced using steel and cement. A perforating gun loaded by wireline explodes charges into the rock. At the surface, numerous pumps inject fluid into the well at extremely high pressure. The perforated rock is fractured and filled with sand or tiny ceramic balls known as proppant, allowing the gas and hydrocarbons to flow. The section is plugged and the process is repeated in stages along the length of the well.
Okay. So, hydraulic fracturing. The definition that you've seen on there is Halliburton's definition of hydraulic fracturing. In 2015, under a Conservative government, David Cameron, in the Infrastructure Act, redefined hydraulic fracturing. Hydraulic fracturing in government terms means high volume hydraulic fracturing. So they've set a limit. They use it by how much water or fluid, water plus chemicals, is pumped into the well at each stage of the test. Okay? So the government now define hydraulic fracturing as what we would call high volume hydraulic fracturing. Anything under that is no longer classed as hydraulic fracturing or fracking. So what that means is 46% of all the wells drilled in America under what has been classed in America as hydraulic fracturing, if you look at it in terms of the UK, is no longer classed as hydraulic fracturing. It's classed as conventional drilling. So, the importance of East Riding in the supply of energy. So what you've seen is this was building up for 50 years. As you can see, this is off the North Sea, off Great Yarmouth and all the way up the coast and Lowestoft. It's one of the most active gas fields in the world. 173 rigs are currently operating out there. There has been a huge amount of talk that the offshore gas pockets, because they were massive in that North Sea, huge amounts of gas and oil. There is talk that it is drying up. But what has tended to happen is that they are decommissioning a lot of these rigs. But the new ones that they're bringing in now have, they've found, the last two they brought in last year, the two new wells that they drilled, are producing much more, a much higher volume of fossil fuel than previous years. So from previous wells, they're now, the volume of gas they're extracting is much larger off fuel wells. So whether or not that contras this myth that we're running out of energy in the North Sea, or I don't know, but people think that it's not true. It's just that it's cheaper to drill onshore than it is offshore. So it's between 3 and 100 times cheaper to drill onshore than it is offshore. Now what we see, why Holderness is suddenly becoming important in all this, is because those massive gas deposits you've got offshore, you find onshore in Holderness. We live in an area of what's called reclaimed land. Our topography, the earth structure underneath and the layers is similar, much similar to Scandinavia, to Holland, than it is to anywhere else in the UK. We have the ditches that provide the drainage to keep the land dry. So what they discovered was those massive offshore deposits that you get in the North Sea, you now find onshore, particularly in the Holderness area. So, existing infrastructure, we've already mentioned it. This, that top left-hand picture there, that is Easington. Underneath there, this rather large monstrosity here, this is Saltend. Now Saltend was also in Holderness, and Saltend was formerly owned by BP, but was bought by INEOS. And at Saltend what they do is they extract the polymers from the ethanol produced from the gas, shale gas in particular, for plastics. Now, when INEOS bought this, they bought somewhere else as well. They bought up in Grangemouth from BP. There was lots of consternation up there to do with wages and work and things, but they also bought the pipeline. There is the gas pipeline that stretches all the way from Grangemouth down to Saltend, and from Hull you can walk part of it. On one side of the road it says British Gas, and on the other side of the road it says INEOS. You know, the little concrete labelling things they put on. Now, INEOS are struggling to get the shale gas. The last time they brought the shale in to Saltend, They tankered it over from Pennsylvania by boat or ship, and then they brought it into Grangemouth, piped it down to Salt End. Now we have one other thing in Holderness, and that's the gas storage caverns. Now part of our strata in Holderness, we have a salty layer, and salt holds the gas in place. So what they did was they drilled, there's 9 of these chambers, so that's the above ground, this is the above ground scene, and that's the schematics of the below the ground. Each one of those chambers is twice the size of St Paul's Cathedral. So what they do is they store the excess at Aldborough, and then in times of high demand it's pumped directly into, because it's fully processed and everything, and it's pumped directly into the grid for consumption. There has been instances, by the way, of these chambers collapsing as well. Whoops. So, we talked about the new pipeline infrastructure. This is the pipeline area, this is what Murphys have laid. As you can see, West Newton Camp sits right in the middle of it all. This area here is where, as I said, they're looking for between 8 and 10 compounds, each capable of taking 40 wellheads. A little bit I should tell you about West Newton A. It was originally called West Newton 1, but it isn't actually in West Newton. It's in a tiny little place called High Frosham, near Marton, which is also a little village. Houses, 8 houses, 2 farmhouses. And the reason it's called West Newton is because originally the well site was going to be at West Newton. But Simon Cayley, the Cayley Family Trust, who leased the land to Rathlin Energy to drill the well, realised that the original site was overlooked by his house. So we were told that he didn't want it there, so they moved it. Now, West Newton B is actually back where West Newton A should have been. So, yeah, they changed the name as well from West Newton 1 to West Newton A. And I think that's because A, B, C and D don't sound quite as threatening as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, the gas fields of West Yorkshire. To recover 15% of shale gas from the Upper Bowland Basin, and this is in Lancashire. So Professor Andy Alpin, or Applin even, stated that it would need 33,000 wells on 5,500 pads. And that's just to recover 15% of the shale gas in Lancashire. And as we said, Rathlin have said they want at least 8 well sites within a 2-mile radius of West Newton A. So, Rathlin Energy, who are they? And why did they do what they did to us? Okay, so on the 17th of January 2008, Rathlin Energy UK Limited were incorporated. Now, Rathlin Energy is owned by a company called Connaught Oil and Gas. Connaught Oil and Gas are based in Calgary. They have various subsidiaries, but Connaught Oil and Gas were instrumental in the destruction of the tar sands, or one of the companies that were operating there. On the 25th of January 2008, Connaught Oil and Gas set up another company, Sunderland Holdings Incorporated. Sunderland Holdings are based in Jersey, and this is how they transfer the money. It is a holding company, so Connaught Oil and Gas transfer the money to Sunderland Holdings in Jersey and then feed it into Rathlin. Rathlin are held in negative equity and have been held in negative equity since they were incorporated on the 17th of January 2008. And then, on the 1st of July 2008, Rathlin Energy were awarded Pedal 183. Now, a PEDAL is a Petroleum Exploration and Development Licence, and is what's given out by the government to exploratory companies and production companies Petroleum Exploration and Development Licence. Well, there is guidance issued by the government, lots of, actually there's not that much, but what I've done is I've taken out a couple of things that I think are really interesting. So number 19, all applicants must demonstrate their financial viability. Financial capacity must be clearly available to the applicant at the time of application and not be subject to uncertain future events like share issues. And this is hugely important because when you start to unravel the finances of these companies, you'll find they're all in a huge amount of difficulty. Even INEOS are having to go back and restructure financially. To be awarded a licence, a company must be registered in the UK, either as a company or as a branch of a foreign company. So that's why we can pick up all the information, because it's all at Companies House. But what it also means is that if anything happens, Connaught Oil and Gas are actually 2 steps removed from any environmental disaster, because they're going through Sunderland Holdings. So what that technically means is that if there's an environmental disaster of any description, or if there's anything that drastically goes wrong, Rathlin are held in negative equity. Connaught will liquidate them, and we will be left to pick up the bill. Now, if there's an environmental disaster at the moment, if the onus falls on the person leasing the land to the drilling company to pay for the environmental spill. If they don't pay, your parish council is the next port of call. Only applicants who pass the Oil and Gas Authority's financial criteria and standards of operatorship and safety and environmental capability requirements can be considered for award of a production licence. And wait till you see Rathlin. So, this is what they were awarded. Pedal 183 covers the whole of Holderness. 240,000 acres is licensed to drill in Holderness. The only bit is the white bit in the middle, and that's Beverley. So Beverley is exempt, but everywhere else is licensed to drill. I mean, when you think about that, 240,000 acres, that's huge. Huge. It's the largest pedal in the UK. So, here we go. This is the profit and loss account for Rathlin. Now, I've been following Rathlin Energy for a long time, and I run company credit checks on them. And what I was discovering in 2014, 15, 16, is that, because these accounts have only just come in, obviously they file a year behind. So, what I kept stumbling across whilst I've been running these credit checks is Rathlin owe 31 million. Rathlin are now 32 million. And then I got 2 notifications before this was filed in September, October time. And these 2 notifications said, we think Rathlin will be liquidated within a year. And I didn't know, because all the time that the financial, the profit and loss accounts had been coming in, as you can see, they'd been running consistently around £1 million, £1.5 million in debt. But I kept coming across this 30 odd million. And then all of a sudden, this year, when they posted for 2016, they included impairment of intangible assets to the tune of nearly £35 million. So they've had to declare this massive loss. So currently, they've never paid any tax. I just thought I'd drop that one in as well. So even though they've something like up until last year, they've got quite a bit of dosh sat in Jersey. They're not filtering it through to the UK. So the loss for the financial year was 35,944,905. I know, it was breathtaking, isn't it? But it's all right, because the government said they would only issue pedals to companies that were financially viable. So we're all safe and secure. Oh, but guess what? They've got a pedal. So, another little interesting piece of information on the profit and loss accounts. During 2016, the company incurred expenses totaling £40,833. And in 2015, that was £50,000 from a management consulting company in which David Montague Smith, who is one of the directors and was the CEO or chief executive or whatever you want to call it, managing director of Rathlin Energy. He owns this company and they couldn't even afford to pay him. So his company gave services to the tune of £40,833 and they still owe £4,000 on it. So they couldn't even find the whole of the money to pay the director's company for delivering services. Oh, but it's all right, because his company delivered services at a rate consistent with other third-party providers. So it's okay, he can pay himself. Sunderland Holdings. Now, these are the last counts I got from 2014, because you have to pay for them. So it's a pain. But as you can see, Sunderland Holdings own 100% of Rathlin Energy. When they were first incorporated in 2008, there was other people involved with the shares, but Connaught Oil and Gas bought them out and now have 100% stake. They were issued at what they call no par value or nil value shares. And what that means is if the company liquidates, then they're not liable, then the people who own the shares do not become a creditor. So you don't owe them any money. They don't, you know, you liquidate, everything's wiped clean. So no matter how much money Connaught put in through Sunderland Holdings and the shares, if Rathlin liquidate, Rathlin don't owe them anything. And that just shows you that Connaught have got 919 shares. Oh. What's happened here? Oh gosh. Oh, there we go. Sorry. So, we've looked at the pedal. What about the planning process? Because this is really, really important. Because this is your chance to object to what they're going to be doing in your backyard. For us, drilling and fracking wasn't as widely known in 2012, and an awful lot of this went under the radar. So in 2012, Rathlin submitted a planning application and they held a public consultation. Now, the little tiny village of Marton Ellaby is the nearest village, really, and it was where the traffic was designated to come through on the traffic management plan. And in our little village of Ellaby, there's a beautiful church, and it is a community building. But Rathlin chose not to hold their public consultation there, which was the nearest public or community building available. They chose to hold it in Aldborough. I have no idea why, but I guess it's the furthest away they could get without looking as though they're being a long way away. And in 2013, totally unopposed, Rathlin Energy were given permission to drill at West Newton. And what happened was, nobody actually knew what was going on. So these were some of the letters. I think they received 5 letters of objection from the council. And what it said was, yet never having received any planning notification from East Riding Planning Department. Bear in mind, this well is under 5 minutes walk from where these people live. I did not receive any planning intention notice. I was not given notification of this meeting and was therefore unable to attend. I was assured by David Montague Smith at the meeting held in Aldborough Village Hall, I would be notified of the meeting to be held on January the 3rd. That was the planning committee meeting to hear the pros and the objections and things for the well. This did not happen, although I left my name and address with your steward at the November meeting. It has come to my attention that the estimated number of heavy goods vehicles likely to be used in connection with this application has been increased from an initial 60 a day to 300 a day. This is huge. So, they got their planning permission, and then in 2015, they reapplied. Now, there'd been another extension to permit heard about Crawberry Hill. We had West Newton B, and we had the extension to planning for West Newton A. These were 3 different planning committee meetings held in Beverley. At each one of these, everybody who attended that meeting was subject to a full bag search and body pat down. This is to go into a planning meeting. Now, watch the beep at the beginning. I'm sorry, I did film this. Oh, hang on, I'll put my glasses on. Technical malfunction again. So we're all queuing up to go into the planning committee meeting.
A bit of common sense.
So you realise that you're going to get
This is to go into a planning meeting, I promise you.
To allow access for people today, if people don't want to conform to that criteria, they won't come in.
Even though he's breaking
Okay. I'll move it on slightly because it's the end of it I really want you to see. I want you to watch this lady's face. She shouldn't be, and none of them, nobody should be subjected to this. To go into a planning meeting. So, in 2013, this went unopposed. In 2014, there was a lot more opposition, and they were granted, in 2014 there wasn't the opposition because nobody knew about this, but they were given permission to start well testing. So in 2013, what happened was Rathlin did the core drill. They drilled over 3,200 metres into the Bowland Shale. And then they came back in 2014 to do well testing. So they suspend the well, and then they reapply for the well testing, and then they were granted. Now, they wanted to test in 3 separate areas. So, the first one was right down at the bottom in the Bowland Shale, and they wanted to conduct what they called a mini fall-off test. And the purpose of that was to discover whether or not there was enough hydrocarbon reserve in the formation to make the well viable for production. A Numerian formation flow test, slightly above the Bowland Shale level, and then what they call Kirkham Abbey level. So they're the different layers that you find. Okay, so right at the bottom you've got the Bowland Shale. Bowland Shale is really, really hard. You have to bludgeon the gas out. Okay, so that's why they do the hydraulic fracturing down there, but they also do it at these other levels as well. Kirkham Abbey is what's classed as coal bed methane. So much higher up, around about, I guess about 1,800, 2,200 metres down. And again, they wanted to establish how much gas there was and whether or not it would be commercially viable to go into production. But I will tell you that they did know, because at West Newton they described it, we've described it for them as hitting the frack pot. They reckoned it would be more lucrative than what is now coming out of Silicon Valley, were their words. It's huge. So, in 2014, one of the very, very few times we actually got to speak to David Montague-Smith, there was an interview conducted with him. So what I've done is I've pulled out a few little points from that meeting. So one of the questions we asked was, what depth is the Bowland Shale? Using my glasses. And these replied 2,600 to 2,500 metres. But bear in mind they drilled over 3,200 metres beyond the Bowland Shale. According to Montague-Smith. Oh, and he was a banker, by the way. I just thought I'd drop that one in. Would you ever describe shale as a conventional reservoir? No. At what depth and in which formation are you conducting the mini fall-off test? Within the Bowland Shale. Okay, so when they're doing fracking, what they do is they bring in lots and lots of chemicals. Now I have a list here of some of the chemicals that were brought in to West Newton A. Crystalline silica, which is used as proppant in hydraulic fracturing. So we've got all these things here. Can you see they've been classed by the HSE and whoever? So these, the hazards include inhalation, corrosives, irritants, toxics, as you can see. We've got toxics there. And then we go on a little bit more. And we have asphyxiants, toxics again, and we're coming on to the explosives now. You see all these different things were brought on site, and also some that they didn't list as well. Now, as you can see here, we've got other things, but we have cesium-137 and americium-241 beryllium. They are both radioactive substances. They're used in the making of dirty bombs, and it is depleted uranium. And this is coming down our roads. This is coming through our villages. And as you can see, this is how they store their chemicals. That's just some of the toxic ones, a container containing toxic substances on site. They were issued with a breach of permit for all this, but I won't go into the breaches tonight. But ultimately, Rathlin in 2014 were issued with 16 breaches to permit, and after the well was suspended in 2015, they were issued with 3 more breaches for monitoring of the water and recording. So, the Environment Agency. If something happens and there's a breach, or the Environment Agency are involved in any way, they bring in what they write up their findings on what they call a compliance assessment report, or CAR report, we call them. Okay, now this one was issued in July, 5th of September 2014, that, and then there's the July bit's next. So this is what they do, they put the name of the person, often it's redacted, they won't tell you the names of who they spoke to on site, that's redacted, but you get all these through Freedom of Information requests. Every time we rang and there was something wrong, the Environment Agency would go down. The Environment Agency at West Newton never made an unexpected visit, they always made an appointment to go, and generally when we'd rung about a complaint. You might struggle to see this, but what I want you to know is that what they wrote on this CAR report is really important, and they put, the Environment Agency, they have appointed a suitable radioactive waste advisor and radiation protection advisor. That's the same person, by the way. The RPA has carried out training in July 2014 such that a number of personnel are radiation protection supervisors. But it's all right, because guess what? Rathlin aren't fracking. That's why they call it a mini fall-off test. So, how did this impact on us? Well, we're going to go on, but before we do that, I want to show you a little video, and then we're going to take a break after this. There's something you need to know about this video, is that it was recorded all on the same level. So when you're listening to the people speaking, and when there's a drilling sequence in there as well, the noise level of the recording equipment has not been changed. Now that doesn't mean a huge amount to me, but apparently to techie people it means a lot. And with the sound, it is what it is. It's all recorded at the same level.
Well, I live a few miles away. I was first alerted to this problem, the exploratory well at West Newton, because that's an area I often walk my dog.
My name is Jan Naylor. I live in New Allaby. I've lived there for 20 years. We moved here because it's such a beautiful area and we fell in love with it. We were a bit taken aback when we heard what was happening down at West Newton. We never heard anything about planning. We believed at that particular moment in time that they were drilling for water.
I didn't know anything about it until the site was there. Unfortunately, people don't look at the planning applications.
The first time we sort of heard about it was when they were bringing transport through to start with the original well pad site. It was the lorries carrying hardcore and things like that that were going through the village. Not large convoys, just one or two lorries now and then. Nothing that we were overly concerned about. But as time went on, the traffic that was coming through the village got heavier and heavier and more frequent.
Those first big convoys in were awful. And of course, if they're going to production, that's going to happen all the time.
The first big contingency of tankers that we were aware of that came through was the morning when they had 64 vehicles come throughout the day. It was about 8:30 in the morning when there was a high police presence in the village. We realised that something was obviously going to happen. We had no idea what. Just before 10 o'clock it started rolling through. The first lot that came through were for about an hour and a half. Then they had a pause where what they were dropping off obviously was coming back through the village. And then again, just after 1 o'clock, another convoy, slightly smaller than the first one, came through. And the last vehicles leaving the village that day was about 5:30 at night. So from 10 o'clock in the morning till 5:30 at night, our village was at an absolute standstill.
And where the new site's going to be, it's going to go through Sprockley village, which will feel it more than they did in my village because it's a village with houses closer to the main road.
I bought a derelict farmhouse in the middle of West Newton approximately 80 years ago, and it had been empty for 50 years and was in a quite horrendous state. I spent 5 years renovating it, and most of the work myself. Moved in, I think, 2 years now, and of course I hear of this drilling operation, and it's rather heartbreaking, so I don't like it at all. Devastated by it. I spoke to Rathlin yesterday, and they do not seem to understand my concerns. It is heavy industrialisation of the area. We now have an industrialised dump, I would call it. I thought I had a beautiful house here, but sort of live in the middle of a town away from it.
Okay. Where do you begin? These people are my friends and my neighbours, you know. Greg's now struggling, but he's moved out. You could see the roads, how narrow they were. This is what they're bringing down. And when Jan spoke about the high police presence, there was 3 of us down at the well site at that time, camped, and a dog. We had over 120 police. There was a policeman stationed outside virtually every house at West Newton and one at Ellaby, where Jan lived. You remember she said there was a high police presence in the village. We were first alert to it. That's the village of Ellaby, it's on the traffic management plan route. There was a policeman stationed outside virtually every house there, from 8:30 in the morning till gone 9:30 at night. And the whole village was at a total standstill. People could not get in or out of their drives, their homes, all day. All day. But this didn't happen once. This happened as these convoys were coming in continually.
Was this every day?
Yeah. I mean, when you look at vehicle movements, when we were logging them, we logged everything. Okay, so we logged the lorries, the number plates, what was on them, the company, what time they went in, what time they came out. But we also logged the number of police vehicles and the security guards and the drillers. So every single vehicle that came in and out of that well site we logged. And I think maybe one of the quietest days in September we had, there was still over 60 vehicular movements. So that's when you take out you take into account security, drill riggers, the police, up and down and up and down and up and down.
What was the average amount of diesel vehicles?
Diesel vehicles?
Yeah.
Whoa, I've never broken that down. I suppose.
Are we looking about 900?
A day?
Yeah.
No, not a day, no.
Sorry, I asked the question.
I figure it depended what they were bringing in and what was happening. But we used to get a minimum, maybe 3-4 a day, sometimes a huge amount more, maybe sometimes not as many. Depends what they were doing and what was happening. But yeah, huge. I mean, those convoys are horrific.
Yeah.
When they start rolling down those little country lanes through your villages. In Jan, who was on the video, there was 2 chemical spills in Ellaby that was covered up. We don't know what they spilled.
Was anyone ill?
Oh, we'll come on to that later.
Okay.
So, what I'm going to do now is we're going to have a 10-minute break. I think 10 minutes will be enough if people want to go to the loo and get a drink or something, and then carry on after the break. And after the break we will talk about the mini frack, people being ill, and various other things as well. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, if you're ready. Okay, so one of the things that comes up over and over again is the traffic management plan. When any energy company submits their planning application documents, they do include the traffic management plan in it. But to be honest with you, a traffic management plan is not worth the paper it's written on. Rathlin was supposed to adhere to several things. Every vehicle going into and out of the site should have had a sticker in the window saying connected to Rathlin Energy. That never happened. There should have been no convoys, and that didn't happen either. So, convoys. the bottom here, what you can see is liquid nitrogen, and it was brought into West Newton by the ton load because they couldn't get the well to flow, so they had to artificially stimulate the well. This is in September time, and they just maybe end of August, beginning of September on through to November. So that next level up, so the Bowl and Shell was at the bottom where they didn't do the mini frack that they did, and then up above that you've got this Kirkham Abbey formation level in the Marion layer. They couldn't get the gas to flow, so they used liquid nitrogen to artificially stimulate the well, and that's what you can see coming in there. So convoys, point 3 of the traffic management plan stated, trucks leaving the site after deliveries must leave in single order, giving a 10-minute interval. Never happened. Not ever. They just went out in slow, just one behind each other. And at no times will vehicles be allowed to wait or queue along the designated access route. That didn't happen either. They even queued through Ellaby. They were queued up the road down Piper's Lane to the well site of Fosham there. So yeah, this didn't happen. It's not worth the paper it's written on. They also came a different route as well. I saw them going through Skirler several times, which is another little village which has nothing to do. You know, they should not have come through Skirler at all. And they were in convoy. Tom Selkirk, who's one of the directors of Rathlin Energy, but he's also high up at Connaught Oil and Gas. He's Canadian, is Tom Selkirk. And he reiterated at one of our community liaison meetings, only one lorry is allowed into and out of the site at a time. And again, this has been reinforced amongst all contractor organisations. I will tell you a little bit about these community liaison meetings. They're token. Okay, members of the community go along, but they are vetted before they're even allowed to join. And certain questions are asked, like, do you know so-and-so or do you know so-and-so? So what's said at these community, and also Rathlin write the minutes of what is said at the community liaison meetings. So, this is West Newton at night. The light pollution stretched for over 2 miles. And people at Withenwick and West Newton were affected by the lights. I mean, I can't tell you, it's so bright. It is unbelievable. And you can see. We also suffered with noise and air pollution.
Apologise, sorry.
The noise is the rig working 24 hours a day, and the air pollution. Now what you're looking at in this slide here, this is what is called a single covered stack. And this, when they do the tests, whether it be the mini fall-off test or the flow test, whatever they want to term it, on these tests what they're doing is gas will naturally be released, and they have to capture that gas and do something with it. Because it's not processed, it's collected in tanks and then it's burnt off. Now with the single covered stack, you shouldn't actually see a flame. It should burn, and that's whatever they've collected. We don't know what the gas was collected. That was another issue. The gas was never tested. But what happened was, Rathlin were dogged throughout the whole of the life of this well with pressure issues. Now when it came to flaring the gas, there wasn't enough pressure in the well to ignite the flame on the stack. So the gas was what was called cold vented. And when we say cold vented, what we mean is that the gas was just let out to the atmosphere. Now we know from the Environment Agency that nobody tested the gas. We also know that when Rathlin, the EA did actually close down the site and try and put in an odor emissions management system, But that failed miserably because Rathlin just went back to doing what they wanted, and the EA just let them open up again anyway, because they were never there when Rathlin cold vented the gas. Rathlin were trying to capture this gas to see what was in it in what we call Tedler bags, but they had it by a generator. So it was just hopeless. So nobody knew what went into this, what was cold vented. There was lots of complaints. Now the lady up the road, who was probably one of the nearest people to it, Sandra, lots of people were ill that lived near the cold venting, lived near the well site. And we can't prove anything because obviously the gas was never tested. Public Health England will not conduct any baseline surveys of the health of the people who live in the area, so you've no baseline. They won't go back in and talk to people, but people suffered various things: eyes streaming, coughing, sore throat. Sandra came out in a rash. One day her clothing smelt that she put out on the line. You get a letter off Rathlin as well to say that sometimes the pollution, you have to take your washing in because it falls a bit like acid rain, so your clothes might suddenly start to disintegrate.
Shit.
So, yeah, we had huge issues with this cold venting of the gas, but you can't ever prove anything. But people round there are reporting things of fibromyalgia. People are ill and they don't know what they've got. One of the people that used to work on Cayley's farm's told he's got farmer's lung. There's people still being ill. Sandra can't walk now. And she used to come down to camp every day. Okay, you know, she had autoimmune problems anyway, being diabetic, but now she's got so much wrong with her. And this was actually reported on the front page of The Guardian as well. Noxious smells make locals ill, I think they titled it. Okay, so in 2015-16, on our little West Newton B site, we put out this. And this is a study from America. And this study, released by Hopkins, looked at adverse health outcomes in individuals living in close proximity to a fracking site. And we got a comment underneath this Facebook posting from a lady who, so if you came up Piper's Lane, Sandra was on the left, this lady lived on the right, at the top of the road. So this is the bit that we put under the study. Health symptoms including nasal and sinus problems, migraines and fatigue. People reported the same things to the Environment Agency when Rathlin were at West Newton A. And Angela, yes, I agree. Lived in Martin at the time and started with respiratory problems, needing an inhaler. Leak was found, site closed. Breathing back to normal. Wasn't rocket science to work it out. Moved house now. Fight on, guys. So we put, thank you for your support, Angela. Martin was such a beautiful place to live before Rathlin destroyed it. Unless you have lived through it, you can't understand the impact on your health, family and quality of life. We are so pleased you managed to sell, although devastated you had to. We are also pleased your health is back. If you didn't register your problems with the doctor, please do so, as there are people who lived in the village being tested for ill health due to the gas leak. It's hard to prove the connection retrospectively. This was November 2016. And then Angela wrote back, we were lucky we were only renting. Lived through it the first time, the constant police vans, traffic, noise and lack of wildlife around. We decided to move once we knew there was going to be another well. I really feel for everyone living close by. Keep fighting. But that wasn't the only impact. We alluded to it a bit when we said we were lucky to sell. House prices do fall no matter what they say. Now when you're objecting to planning, you can't include house price devaluation in your objection because the government and the planning regulators say, well, house prices are fluid. They can go up or down. But we do know that in the area, house prices did fall by quite a considerable amount. One of the ladies that sold, she lost 23%. One of the other things is that if you do get a buyer, you can't get a mortgage. The Bank of Santander were the first ones to refuse the mortgage on people living in Martin who were trying to sell. But Ellaby people are also affected. They live about 3 miles away from the well site, and the man that lived next to the pub, his house had been on the market 2 years, and he finally got a buyer. And you know, you send off, they do a survey, don't they? And that goes to the mortgage provider, and then it comes back. Now, 3 things were found on this survey. One was to do with guttering and was like really minor, could be fixed. I can't remember what the second one was, but it was also really, really minor. The third one was, you live within 3 miles of a fracking site, so we are not going to give you an insurance. 2 years he'd been trying to sell his house, 2 years, and the mortgage was refused on it, and he wasn't alone. Also, the insurance thing. Now, we had a lot of issues with seismic testing that I won't go into here because that's like a whole evening all of its own. But one of the things is your insurance doesn't cover you. It doesn't cover you for the seismic testing damage, and don't let them tell you that it is a non-invasive process, because we have over 200 properties that were damaged in Holderness due to the seismic testing alone. Your insurance does not cover you. Some people were paid out in a gagging clause. But also, your insurance doesn't cover you for hydraulic fracturing damage. The best we have found, now they won't increase your insurance prices as of yet, we don't think. Our insurance prices didn't go up. But what they will say, we cannot cover you for damage due to drilling onshore, but what we will do is we will take the company to court on your behalf. We will sue on your behalf. Now, this is a civil matter, and it can be dragged out for years and years and years, as we know with the seismic testing. But that is the best we've got, and that was with Zurich. Not that I'm plugging Zurich, because I guess if you write to your own insurance company, they may well tell you the same. Okay, so right back from 2013, Rathlin hit problems in the well, and I'll give you a little list of some of the things that happened in that well. So they reported an incident on the 6th of October to report a release of gas from 18 5/8 inches and 13 3/8 inches annulus of the well. I'll tell you what that means. Okay, the part we're looking at is the top part of the well. If you look at the schematics of the well, where it is, the different levels of formation, this level here, 18 5/8, 13 3/8, is at the top of the well. This is where the chalk aquifer sits. So Rathlin drilled through a saline chalk aquifer. I won't go into the walk because that would be a whole night of its own as well. But suffice to say, they reported an incident of a release of gas. And this is when they're only doing the core drill. I think they were well testing it. They've denied that they were doing a test at that time, but I can't prove it was back in 2013. But I can't understand how, if you're not doing anything, how gas suddenly comes out of the well, you know.
So can I confirm that is through the casing? So the casing, one of the casings failed, or? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the outer casing, the cement, basically disintegrated and gas got up between it.
Well, we'll come on to this a little bit later. So what happened was, in the 3rd quarter, the well being suspended, work was undertaken in the annulus of the well to remediate pressure issues prior to, in 3rd quarter, being suspended. Now, when they suspend the well, this is in 2013, they suspended it, ready to apply for the well testing in 2014. What this means is, and how, yes, you're right, the well integrity had failed and had to be re-cemented. In 2015, at a meeting with the HSE, the Health and Safety Executive, Rathlin described this as, we had to do a bit of a cement job. That was the words they used. we had to do a bit of a cement job.
Jesus.
The well operator advised the health and safety executive of the ignition of gas within the 18 and 5/8 casing. Can you see it's all in this same chalk aquifer level,
Yeah.
right at the top of the well? And the ignition of gas when being rough cut for the installation of the wellhead. Translated into layman's terms, there was a fire in the well. The well operator submitted a report of an incident on the 9th of August 2014 to report the unplanned closure of the blowout preventer. I think this is the most crucial bit of information in the whole of the Rathlin debacle. This period of time was when Rathlin was supposed to be doing the mini fall-off test, or the mini frack, that they subsequently denied doing. Now, I don't know if people know what a blowout preventer is, but I will describe it to you. If there's a sudden release of oil or gas, you remember years ago you used to see pictures where the oil was like pumping out, you know, where they had a blowout. A blowout preventer was designed as a shutter, if you like. It shuts off that supply. It works the same for gas as it does for oil. Now, the unplanned closure of the blowout preventer is pretty crucial, because what that means is something was happening in that well to mean there was a huge release of gas, and the blowout preventer kicked in. Now, you can have two types of blowout. Well, there's several different types of blowout preventer. Some are operated manually, some are operated automatically. Okay, now most companies choose a manual system, because if you're in production and something happens and the blowout preventer suddenly closes and it's not really a blowout, it costs a great deal of time and money and effort. Now, you heard of Deepwater Horizon?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the issues, the biggest issue with the Deepwater Horizon is the blowout preventer. They struggled to get it closed. There was various things. Now, I was reading about this only the other night, and it's really, really interesting, because the blowout preventer on Deepwater Horizon should have sliced through the pipe and sealed it off. Okay? So what I want to know is, and the question that's been bugging me, and we'll come on to the mini frack that didn't happen, but what were they doing? If they denied doing this mini fall-off test during this period of time, what were they doing to cause the unexpected closure of the blowout preventer? Okay, so the well operator submitted a report to the Health and Safety Executive. They are shutting down the well because there is a small pressure within the well caused by formations from activity. This is referring to the closure of the blowout preventer. But it's all right, because Rathlin weren't doing anything in the well at the time, according to Rathlin. And on the 10th of September, following communications with the Environment Agency, Rathlin Energy voluntarily suspended well testing operations. Technically, they voluntarily gave in the EA, but subsequently they did start up again. Okay, so these are just some of the problems they had in the well. On the 4th of August 2014, Caroline Foster stood outside West Newton A and said to me 5 times, "We are currently undertaking a mini fall-off test within the Bowland Shale." On the 9th of August, the blowout preventer closed and the whole site was shut down. On well intervention equipment, and now it's what's called a coiled pipe. Okay, so this coiled pipe is continuous. So you know at the beginning when you were watching them wire line it all in, well, this is a bit like a diner rod is the best way you can describe it. It was specifically designed to drill onshore but offshore wells, so it just runs continually, so they don't do the wire lining thing. So you stand onshore and you're drilling under the sea offshore, and you use this bit of equipment. It can also do what they call go fishing. So if you lose something down the well, if the drill bit breaks or anything like that, you go fishing with this, so you put your thing down, literally do what it says, hook it out with it, you put a magnet on the end. You can also put a camera on the end, so it's a bit like a multi-purpose diner rod, really, is the best way I can describe it. So, this mini fall-off test we keep talking about. What Rathlin said in the planning application was, the exploratory operations include a mini fall-off test and an acid wash and acid squeeze. It has extremely low permeability and requires mechanical intervention to enhance its permeability. So what it means is, it isn't going to flow, we need to do something to get the gas flowing. So, for clarity, the intention of a mini fall-off test is not to fracture the formation, but to establish if and what pressure the formation becomes permeable. What that really means. So what they do is, you saw at the beginning, you know, the video where they were putting the pipes down, and then what they do is they put in the fluid, they pump the fluid in, which is the chemicals plus the water plus any proppant if they're going to use it. They pump it in at pressure, and then they hold the fluid within the well, and then it's gradually released. And what happens is they want to see at what pressure the formation will fracture. So they also may be using the perf gun as well. You see they have the explosives there to set the charges off, to put the holes in the side of the casing so they can pump the fluid in. So that's what they're doing. They're holding this fluid at pressure, they cap it off, and then it's naturally released. And they see at what pressure they need for the well to start to flow. So, this is Mr. David Montague Smith. By the way, Mr. Montague Smith lives in Northamptonshire. Guess what? There's no pedal there. I tell you that. So they're not licensed to drill where he lives. But he's alright, see, he can come and drill in my backyard instead, in your backyard. And he stated several times, we did not exercise our permitted option to undertake a mini fall-off test at West Newton A, and we have no intention to. I will tell you that Caroline Foster, the Chief Off-Site Engineer, stood outside West Newton A 5 times. 5 times she told me that's what they were doing. So I'll show you the video. We know you're conducting what you've called a mini fall-off test.
Yeah.
Are you currently undertaking a mini fall-off test?
Within the bowl and shell, yes.
Within the bowl and shell?
Yes.
You are undertaking a mini fall-off test, which is also known as a mini frack.
If that's how you'd like to describe it, yeah.
You are currently undertaking what you have called a mini fall-off test. Okay.
So Montague Smith has lied about what has happened on site.
We can't say that. What we can say is he has said they did not exercise their right to do it.
But his staff say they were doing it.
She is the Chief Off-Site Engineer, so we'd like to think she wasn't lying. She wasn't lying or incompetent. So, the mini frack. What we know about this is that Rathlin Energy had received permission from the East Riding of Yorkshire Council and the Environment Agency to undertake the mini frack. We have never ever disputed this. The permissions were all in place. Rathlin had drilled over 3,200 metres into the Bowland Shale, and we know, because this has been confirmed over and over again, It was confirmed by Caroline Foster that Rathlin Energy were undertaking a mini fall-off test within the Bowland Shale. Rathlin Energy did have all those chemicals on site. They were brought in, along with a sand, oh God, it escapes me now. The sand machine they put the proppant through. I'll think of it whilst I'm standing here. And they were expecting naturally occurring radioactive minerals to be released from the well testing operations. Now we know this because they had the training. Do you remember going back to the car report?
Yeah.
The EA said, we have done the radioactive training. Well, part of that was the waste training as well. And the blowout preventer did unexpectedly close. Something else I should tell you about that 9th of August day. Prior to the well being shut down, and we didn't know at the time that the blowout preventer was closed, but the security was all around. Okay, so the well's sort of in the middle of the compound. This end is where the gates where everybody went in. This is the south end. The north end had a bank, because what they do is when they make the compound, they use the soil and they use that to form a bank, around it. So there was a security guard stood on that far bank. Now I happened to get into a conversation with him, courtesy of a chance encounter at the place he works now. Thank you, Kirsty. And when I spoke to him, he said, I've been really ill. Now, I worked out from what he was saying that he was down on the north end. Now, our camp, if you're facing the gates and the north end's that way, our camp was off to the right. Now, this unexpected release of gas, people smelt it who were camped by the side of the well and people down at the bottom end of the well, and the security guards and things. Now this young security guard, James, said it made me really, really sick. I asked if I could go home and they would not let me go home. Now one of the activists that was on the site at the time, 2 of them actually, they really smelt it badly and they said it was like a cross between death and bitumen. And they said the only way we can explain it is if the bowels of the gates of hell had suddenly opened. Now, the young security guard, he went home and he rang in and he said, I'm not coming back, because he was really poorly. So I was standing talking to him in 2017, and I said, well, when was this? September, October time, when they were doing the cold venting and they should have been flaring? He went, oh no, this was in the summer, in August. So we established that this is what date it was. It was this 9th of August. So something else, I said to him, oh, well, that would have been when they were doing the mini frack. Oh, no, sorry, I lied. He said, that's when they were doing the frack. And I said, but you must have been following all our stuff because Rathlin said they didn't do a mini frack. And he said, no, we were on site. And that day when they started drilling, they said, they came over and they said to all the security guards, do not go near the well, we are now fracking. Okay, just thought I'd share that with you. So the Environment Agency, these are the people into whose hands we are committed to look after us during this process. And the Environment Agency say, we are the Environment Agency, it is our job to look after your environment and make it a better place for you and for future generations. Your environment is the air you breathe, the water you drink and the ground you walk on. Working with businesses, government and society as a whole, we are making your environment cleaner and healthier. The Environment Agency, out there, making your environment a better place. Now, I did lots of freedom of information requests to the Environment Agency about what happened at West Newton, because you have to build up a picture. Whilst it's happening, you don't really know what's going on. You know bits of it, and we've learnt an awful lot more. We were lucky at West Newton. We were camped right by the well site. Literally, if there hadn't been a fence in the channel, well, I could have jumped the ditch anyway. I reckon under 3 seconds to get from my tent to the wellhead. That's how close we were camped, if I, you know. So a lot of this was uncovered afterwards. The freedom of information requests, photographs, watching the videos. But it's difficult. It's like, the only way I can liken it to is you're doing a 50,000 piece jigsaw puzzle in the dark with no picture on. Because you don't know, they don't tell you what is happening. It's all kept secret. So you just have to keep picking and picking away. There's 3 years of research about Rathlin gone into this. So the Environment Agency are really important because they're our link. They're the people that inspect the site, but the Environment Agency, when you speak to them, will tell you, we can't do anything because we go in retrospectively. What can they do? They can't do anything, you know, because it's happened, you call in the EA. So we waited and waited. We did lots of freedom of information requests. The EA have said that Rathlin didn't undertake the mini-frack. But we waited, and at Driffield they had an event and they called it Meet the Regulators. So we went along. And we waited all day outside, talking to people, giving out leaflets, bits of information, and we went in, and finally we got to meet the regulators.
We don't want to be filmed. We're asking not to film.
Are you trying to hide something? Because our conversations need to be recorded, so then when your answers actually come out, we can hold you responsible for what you are doing. Because you're not only facilitating the corporations involved in this, you are actively working with them to destroy these people's countryside, their habitats, the places where they live. And apparently this isn't a concern to you.
Well,
you are a toothless organisation that has no power to hold these people to account, and we will hold you to account. Could you tell me when Rathlin Energy did a mini fall-off test into the Bowland Shale?
No.
Did they? So why did they tell us that they did?
They had permissions in place to do that, but they chose not to do it. So they would have been geared up to do it.
They didn't choose not to do it. There was we was there. We have got the evidence that they did it. We watched them do it. Caroline,
you asked her, was she going to be?
No. Are you undertaking? It was in the present tense. She said, yes, we are.
Are you currently undertaking a mini fall-off test?
Within the Bowland Shale.
Within the Bowland Shale. In other words, it's a mini frack.
So if you would like to describe it, if you describe it as mini frack, that's your phrase of how you describe it.
So,
okay.
Right now, in that moment, they were doing. I've got it here in my backpack. We can show it.
I've seen it.
No, you haven't.
I've seen it. It's on the
You've
internet.
seen the clip.
Don't scare for the bosses, don't listen to their lies. For fix and judgments and this organized. They said, are you on board?
Okay, so when we finally got to meet them, their faces said everything we needed to know. They had believed Rathlin. They still can't prove that Rathlin did the mini frack, but they now believe us. When I was leaving, the people I was with had already gone, and somebody dropped a scarf. And I picked it up and I said, because this obviously was quite near to where they were packing up, near to the end where they were packing up. And I said to them, bet you didn't expect that, did you, today? I bet you thought you'd be in for a quiet day. And he said, we waited all day for you. We knew you would come. So yeah, it was a hard day. But at least they know the truth, even if Rathlin still keep denying it. So they were issued to 16 breaches to permit, 19 in total, but only 16 during the 2014 time. No current list of chemicals available on site, so all those chemicals took 15 minutes or something to get a text message through, or an email, I think, Chemicals brought on site that had not been approved by the Environment Agency. So all those chemicals plus a lot more that you saw had already been approved by the EA, but several were brought on that hadn't, and they were used by Expro at Kirkham Abbey level. Staff competence and training was huge. Inadequate accident and emergency planning. Management systems and operating procedures. Illegally cold vented gas. Multiple breaches of the same condition with the odours emanating from the site. Monitoring of emissions and the environment. No odour management plan implementation. So those were the breaches, some of them. I mean, they were very in-depth. But how did it impact ecologically? There's one thing I must say, is that you will think you're going mad, okay? When you're researching this, when you're watching it unfold, because you'll have a piece of paper in one hand that says we're doing this, then in the other hand, they deny it, you know, they called you the liar. No, you're lying. But you've got the bit of paper proving it, and you just think, oh God, I'm going mad. Are they right? Am I wrong? So one of the things that Rathlin said, they do an environmental risk assessment. They didn't have to do the extended, more in-depth version of the impact assessment. And one of the things they said was there was no brown hairs in the area. This is a picture of a dead brown hare in Rathlin's perimeter ditch. This bit always makes me cry, I'm really sorry. Opposite the well site, there is, obviously it's just farmland both sides. Now there's the road, you've got the well, you've got the road, and then you had where we had a row of tents alongside a little hedge. Well, actually quite a big hedge. And part of this hedge was a protected area. It's protected and an EU subsidy was given, and it was protected because it was a beetle bank. And I used to watch these beetles cross the road in the morning, and then I'd watch them all march back again. These beetles were incredible, beautiful. Hundreds and hundreds died in that perimeter ditch, even though the farmer received his subsidy from the EU for protecting the beetles. The state of it. I will assure you, this did not come from us. This is all from the well site. You can see what you've got here. You've got dead beetles. There's also dead voles in there and mice and just general pollution. Now, Rathlin were trying to get rid of this surface scum pollution by using, I suppose, a bit like an absorbent cotton wool, but the Environment Agency said it wasn't working and it was totally unsuitable. They never really did find a way to combat this pollution. And there is one of the little mice. Now, we started finding the bodies of these little mice, the odd one or two. And the only thing we could come to think about was that Rathlin were using a rodenticide, and a slow-acting rodenticide. And this was later confirmed because we got a copy of an email from Rathlin to Shirley Ross, who was the planning officer at the time, and it said, "We are overrun by vermin, so we are using rodenticide." The only people who tested it was the Environment Agency, and they looked at 2, and neither were a protected species. What Rathlin said was also, what the EA also said was interesting. They said, the rodenticide is contributing to the number of dead bodies in the perimeter ditch. Prior to the drilling starting, there had never been anything other than the one brown hair in that perimeter ditch. So this was happening mainly when they were drilling. Now, I was sleeping in a tent one night and they started this well testing, and the drill worker was standing on the monkey board, and he leaned over as I was getting into the tent. He shouted, "You ain't going to get no fucking sleep tonight, are you?" Because they really hated us because we monitored, and I apologise for the language, but that was his words, not mine. So I was lying in the tent thinking, oh God, I wonder what's going to happen tonight. And all of a sudden, this little mouse that had been sharing the tent with me started what I can only describe as a scream, like a high-pitched scream, and started running round and round and round, and then the drilling started. I could hear the noise. I guess it felt the vibrations way before the noise. So the other thing is slow-acting rodenticide, rats, vermin, mice, whatever you want to call them. I don't call them vermin, but you know. They're what's called bait shy. So they take a little bite of something and they only nibble a bit, because then they wait to see if either them or their friends are sick or ill. So slow-acting rodenticide is used literally because what happens is they take a bite, they're not sick and they're not ill, so they eat it all up. And then it begins to slowly poison their system, and then they die. Now, the problem you have is in that area, Rathlin said there were no barn owls, but I will tell you that within a very short distance, there was 3 pairs of nesting barn owls, and also some over at Greg's at West Newton. You know, Greg that moved out. In fact, in 2014, he had 2 lots of fledgling from his 1 pair of barn owls. So 2 lots of fledgling owls. Now, the problem is that the barn owls we knew from the light pollution were beginning to die. They were starving to death because they couldn't hunt because of the light pollution. People started seeing them outside of their territory. Now, barn owls are really, really lazy. You know, they will only travel a certain distance, they stay at home, and they use the same hunting route over and over again. Now, the problem is, they start picking up these animals, these little animals that are ill, because they're slower and they're easier to catch. And they don't know that they're ill. Now, the problem with slow-acting rodenticide is it acts as a secondary poison. So it will kill whatever has eaten it. I will tell you, out of the 6 barn owls, we've only ever seen 1. So 5 have died. This is another picture of the perimeter ditch. What you have here are beetles, mice and vole, and this is a dead barn owl. Now remember, Rathlin said there were no barn owls in the area, like there were no brown hares either. Beacon Security were the second firm that Rathlin brought in to guard the compound. And Beacon were brought in, they're a southern firm, they're huge, they do big corporate things. And Beacon were given the message we know, and the message they were given from Rathlin was, we don't care what you have to do, and we don't care what it takes, just get rid. But unfortunately, some of the Beacon security staff quite liked us. So we had a leak in 2015 on the 5th of March. So did they find out the security was reporting finding protected great-crested newts at West Newton? Oh, bear in mind, there were no great-crested newts at West Newton, according to Rathlin. It was a female great crested. I looked it up and no other newt looks like the female great crested. The stoats was eating the contaminated rats and the voles. Some people thought they were mice and tried killing them. The smells were getting reported by, I should say Beacon, not Bacon by the way, Beacon staff, and they was told not to report it so EA wouldn't come to check it. Someone was even cloning protester profiles and adding the security to see if they were passing information to the protectors. So-and-so got cloned. Keep up the good work, all of you. This is from security. Okay. Powerful stuff. The EA. Oh, I will tell you one thing. There was a young lad that worked on that site. He was just lovely, lovely young kid. He was at university studying nutrition. And because he was suffering from antisocial behaviour issues where he was lived, I was trying to help him. And Rathlin sacked him for talking to me. We know because he came down to site all masked up to tell us. So in 2015, Rathlin produced what they called a fact and evidence-based consultation. Now if you go on the website, I've done a bit of a breakdown of the fact and evidence-based consultation. But what they did was they listed certain things and they put about well-meaning people who don't know anything as their introduction and what they'd achieved during their course of 2012 to 2015. And one of the things they did in this list was they listed about these 10 things, or however many there were, and they would put statements like, they said we were poisoning the wildlife. This was untrue, and this word untrue would be highlighted in red, and they put this next to every one of these bullet points. Now, as I said, we know, because I had an email in my hand from Rathlin Energy saying, we are using slow-acting rodenticide to poison the wildlife because we were overrun by vermin. In the other, I have a statement from Rathlin saying I'm a liar for saying they are poisoning the wildlife. And the Environment Agency, on one of their compliance assessment reports, or CAR reports, stated the operator is carrying out vermin control on site using rodenticide in bait boxes, and that is believed to be contributing to the numbers of small dead mammals found in the open section of the containment ditch. Doesn't obviously take into account the hare, the barn owl and the beetles. But yeah, so on one hand I've got a statement from Rathlin calling me a liar, and on the other hand I've got an email and a CAR report from the EA saying that that's what we're doing. So you can't trust them, you know? You lose faith because this happens over and over and over again. So if they'll so blatantly lie about this, what else are they covering up? And the gold standards that we all hear about and have so much faith in. Fracking will be good for our country, David Cameron said, as he blamed a lack of understanding about the process for some of the opposition to shale gas. For some of the opposition. Note the terminology. What are we running at now? Over 70% of this country now opposes hydraulic fracturing.
That's more than that.
The Prime Minister said that once wells are up and running later this year, there would be more public enthusiasm, and exploiting shale gas reserves could help Europe wean itself off reliance on exports from Russia. Guess what? We don't buy our gas from Russia. The Conservative government has actually taken its support for industry a step further by promising to fast-track the permit process. So it's looking now that councils have to decide on shale permits within 16 weeks of an application. We know from Hart Hill, where they've now bypassed the council and gone directly to government because the council are taking too long to make a decision. We also know that Theresa May, at the last election, in what little bit of a manifesto she had, wanted to remove the planning requirement for anything that wasn't hydraulic fracturing. Now, do you remember right back at the beginning when we said David Cameron defined hydraulic fracturing as high volume? Anything under his definition is not hydraulic fracturing. Theresa May wants to take away the requirement for planning permission for anything that is not hydraulic fracturing at Cameron's definition. So that means people like Rathlin do not have to apply for any permissions or permit, any planning permission to drill this well. Now that was removed. We got a note to say Jeremy Corbyn had been fighting hard. That was actually one of the things that was taken out of the manifesto. There is still a planning requirement in there, but by putting this loophole in, 16 weeks of an application, what that means is people like INEOS, if your council takes too long, can just sidetrack you and go directly to government. To ensure that we get this industry up and running, we can't have a planning system that sees application dragged out for months or even years on end, said the lovely Amber Rudd. The scale of leakage from existing oil and gas wells in the UK may be underestimated because of a lack of data and monitoring, according to the report by academics from the BGS, Durham University and Duke University. I have been out and had a look at some of these wells, and I will tell you, some of these suspended, capped off, orphaned wells, whatever you want to call them, they're just left. Anybody can climb all over them. I've been in a photograph loads. And they are in a pretty appalling state.
Are they leaking?
I can't say if they're leaking because I didn't have the equipment there, but I will tell you. Go down to Nottinghamshire and find something called the Botham 24 and just take a look. You can walk round them all in a day. Go and have a look at the Botham 24. They're oil. Now what we think they're going to do with that, a lot of them are suspended. They were BP, but have now been sold to various other companies. And I think it's iGas in Nottinghamshire that are going to be drilling there. They've got Tinker's Lane and they've got the other one that's now started. And the Botham 24, what they're doing, they're talking about reopening the well because now all the oil has been extracted from it. It's a clear run for the gas. So we don't know. Nobody is monitoring this stuff.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So after this little video, we'll put the lights on and we'll have questions and answers if you wish or whatever. But I'll just show you. We make a promise. This is our promise.
Every breath you take, every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you. Every single day, every word you say, every single